Hello again, this is Gary Mizell from our studio that's hidden away here in Queens. Kind of like I'm hidden away in my apartment of 31 years in a basement in Queens. So I'm so used to being anonymous, and I'm so used to kind of living in the shadows that it's easy to talk about the things that I do because the audience for these presentations is very select. So I have a amazing reputation among the very few people that see these speeches that I'm giving here. So the one thing that I have always thought about since I was very young, back in 1969, my mother sent me to Sweden, Scandinavia. I spent some time in Stockholm, and I spent some time in Norway, and I spent a good deal of time in Scandinavia because my mother said to me, I didn't raise you for 18 years to see you get your head shot off in Vietnam. So if you get drafted, we're going to send you to Sweden. So that was fine with me. So I found it fascinating. It was such a liberal place. The sex laws were so much different than in the United States. You know, America is really the only democratic and free nation where prostitution is illegal. You know, we have all these sex crimes, whereas in France and Italy and Germany and all these other countries, prostitution's been legal probably for my whole life. But in America, they like for sex to be illegal because they like to be able to spy on people and use that as a crime to kind of take care of or attack their enemies. So I'm talking about today something that has been the most troubling issue with planet Earth for, I don't know, 1,000,000 years since we were marsupials. This is the problem. The creator or creators of the universe, after the universe of consciousness of 22 billion years, finally came up with their end product. The only constant is time, and the only product of time is energy. So ET is energy and time. And the universe was 22 billion years old before the Big Bang. The purpose of the original invisible universe was to create the singular product that we inherited, and that product was thought. People take for granted the ability to think, the idea that you can wake up in the morning and think, I can take a shower, and where's the soap, and I think I'm going to have a hamburger for lunch, and these kinds of activities, cerebral activities, are the most advanced activities in the universe. The ability to think is a very, very advanced and complex process, and it took an entire universe to get to that point. So after 22 billion years, the thought fragments that eventually formed the first thought became so viscous that movement was impossible. So the original universe of consciousness became so dense that movement was impossible, and the first three force fields of the photon were the last evolution of the consciousness, universe of consciousness. And after those first three force fields, God was born, or God was created, or God evolved. And then what God did was he created the last three force fields of the photon. So he inherited the first three, he created the next three, and then once the photon was a completed invention, God's first idea and creation was the atom. So that's how the universe evolved. And then the Big Bang was a vehicle for matter to travel and carry its thoughts around. And what goes on up there is something very different than what people think. What happens in this gigantic, oversized universe with supernovas and explosions and meteors and comets and everything, what goes on is thoughts chasing other thoughts. It's kind of like if you're a millionaire, what do you want? Not me, but most millionaires, if they make $1 million, and they think about what they want, or you ask them what they want 2 million. So if you're a thought, then what do you want to be? You want to be two thoughts. So what goes on up there in the universe is all kinds of explosions and crashing, but it's thoughts chasing other thoughts and trying to absorb them. It's the accumulation of thought is what goes on up in the universe. So when the Earth was created, it's like it's not like any other planet in the universe. Planets are far too violent to have a life form like a human being. This is the only planet in the universe with the most advanced life form in existence, which is the human being. The other life forms that are the competition for humanity are all on moons in other galaxies. And it was very heavily contemplated that this planet would be destroyed and that all of the consciousness of humanity and all the other mammals would be thrown up into the atmosphere and pulled in by the consciousness of other life forms that would be eventually the equivalent of a human being, although that would take quite a long time. But the reason for that is because the consciousness of our creators had the motivation of being human beings. This is what God wants to be. This is what the creators of the universe and all the advanced life in the universe want to be. They want to be human beings. They want to be born as humans, and then you would be born as yourself, your John Smith's mother and father, and then you'd be born as John Smith. But you as John Smith would also be born with other entities that know everything about the world of consciousness and everything about the universe that can be known by entities that don't have bodies. So it would be a experience where you as John Smith, by the time you're 15 years old, you'd be Einstein. Every 15-year-old would know everything about physics, and that's what life on this planet would be like, where everybody is sharing their brain and consciousness with these other life forms. They're not going to take you over. They're not going to hijack your brain and body. They're going to be there with you, and then they, for themselves and for you, are going to evolve your thoughts and evolve your DNA and evolve your genetics and evolve the human species. So what I've been able to accomplish in my lifetime is the following. The biggest problem on planet Earth is war. And the Immaculate Conception, which, as I mentioned in other speeches, the idea behind the Immaculate Conception was God wants a body and God can't have a body because there's all this war going on. So an Immaculate Conception is reliant upon the woman only for the genetic composition of the child. There's no X chromosome because God and the other creators don't have a body. So any Immaculate Conception, like the one that supposedly brought Jesus, that Immaculate Conception was a brown baby girl. And that brown baby girl had a tragic life, and she was hustled out of there, and I don't know how she, became the tragedy that she was, but Jesus was smuggled in. You can't have a boy as an Immaculate Conception. So the idea that God and his daughter were going to go around ending war was just the opposite, because after Jesus were the Crusades, and we're killing people for not believing in one God. So that's what's been holding up the process and holding up the process. And they were going to destroy this planet and take all the consciousness of humanity and put it in other life forms so they could grow up in a peaceful environment and be us eventually without the war. So what I've been able to accomplish in my lifetime, I'm 72 now, and I finally got to this point in 2012. So they decided that if worse comes to worse, everybody on this planet will be a woman. The men will be eliminated, and everybody will be a girl, and all birth will be through immaculate conception, and that would be like the preferred method. But we have all kinds of science and mechanisms to end war, and I won't turn this over to the Army because they're going to use it to build a weapon, a conventional weapon by which they can take over the world, because that's what they think about at the Pentagon. And we're not going to have a nuclear war because a nuclear war will kill everybody in the world. So we have a biological weapons arsenal, and that's how they're planning on assaulting nations that don't eventually come into being with the concept of life and society and social science that the Army has. Okay, so here's the problem now. The problem is war. So war has got to come to an end. And it can't just be from weaponization and this technology of building an anti-missile defense system, which I know how to do. The Army won't deploy that. They won't take it in the form that I want to create it. So here's the game plan as I see it. I see the media as the government. I have a BA in advertising. I have a master's degree in journalism. I say over and over that the media is the government, because you don't know anything without the media. You don't, everything you learn, from books and from art, these are all media organs. So now we have, magazines and newspapers and television and radio and all kinds of advanced media. And so the media really is the government because it expands on a worldwide level. So I see my responsibility now as a responsibility to end war. And the way that war is supposed to come to an end, as I see it and as they concur, is through the media. So here's the game plan as I have written it down and described the various steps involved in the evolution of the media. We need 100,000 new journalists. We need tributaries into all of the countries where we have military bases, because we have tributaries there now. What the intelligence agencies have done is use word fragments and sentence fragments, which you can observe quite frequently in the media, like war. What does war mean? War is Wharton. That's where Donald Trump went to college. Or war is Warren. That would be Warren Buffett or Elizabeth Warren. Or it would be a warren of rabbits, because a family of rabbits is called a warren. So they chop every word into half. They chop sentences into half. They use word and sentence fragments to create 1 million tributaries for the intelligence agencies into every country where we have a military base. So that's 172 countries where our 800 military bases are, and all of these military bases have tributaries into all these other countries. So we have tributaries too, and our tributaries are based upon the word and thought fragments, because thought came about in the form of fragments, and these fragments still exist. All of these thought fragments that exist in the universe before the Big Bang have to have some place to go, and they have found a home. They have found a home in all of these tributaries created by the intelligence agencies, where they're going to infiltrate all these countries and put these words and sentence fragments together and start taking over the world by taking over other governments and other intelligence agencies through these half words and half sentences. And then ET and the Force up there have used all these word fragments and sentence fragments as thought fragments, which still exist, and now the thought fragments have homes. So it's a happy outcome for all of the thought fragments that sit out there with no place to go. It's boring unless you're so fragmented that you can't really think, so then you don't know what you're thinking about. But if you're five thoughts out there, that's really a boring existence. And one of the reasons that we have war is because all of the life forms, God and the other creators, when you're just a single thought or just a handful of thoughts in an empty universe, and all you are is, 5 or 6 thoughts, you're really bored. It's really boring. And if you had to sit in a chair for 100 years in this room as just a handful of thoughts, you would become quite hostile. And that hostility matches up with the hostility that testosterone evolves into within the human male. So my accomplishment in life has been to create the option of eliminating males and having a planet where every human being is a woman, plus the mammals that go with it, and then every birth would be by immaculate conception. And that is possibly not going to happen now because of my position now, because of the prominence of my contributions in physics, and because of my point of view, which I'm sharing with you now. So, my mentor was a colonel in the United States Army. My mother met him on a bus. I was on a bus with my mother, and she had a casual conversation with this old average-looking guy that was kind of hunched over. And he spoke a couple of sentences, and I recognized him right away as a genius. I was 23 years old, living with my mother in Denver. And so I told my mother, this guy's highly intelligent, and he was interested in my mother because she was quite a beautiful woman. And so they kind of like hit it off, and she was willing to engage him because of me. And so they became friendly enough for him to call my mother, and then they had dinner together, and then he was trying to woo her into liking him. And the more he hung out with us, the more I found what I wanted in life, because he was a genius. He was an appellate attorney in Denver. He was the most successful, most intelligent appellate attorney in Denver. He was a former prosecutor at the Nuremberg trials after World War II, and he was a colonel in the U.S. Army, and he was part of Army intelligence, which is not necessarily part of the CIA or the FBI. So I tried to engage him as a father figure, and he was willing to go along with that because it brought him closer to my mother. So he was deeply in love with my mother, but my mother found it hard to warm up to him because he was a very average looking guy. So I have to take a break right now because I'm starting to lose concentration from fatigue. So if I can get my cinematographer to pause for just a couple of minutes, I need to regather my energy and start again. I mentioned Colonel Kent, and I want to talk about his greatest contribution to me, because he loved me. He wanted me to be in the Foreign Service. He wanted to oversee a career for me where I would be a part of Army intelligence because he found me to be quite an intelligent person. The book that he gave me was called The True Believer by Eric Hoffer. And he had me read that book, which changed my life in many ways because he was constantly lecturing on the tenets, the principles of that book by Eric Hoffer. It was a treatise on social science, and it was really the sociological and psychological reason that we have wars. Groups like Hamas and Al-Qaeda and terrorist groups, the Symbionese Liberation Army, and all terrorist groups, and all underground assaults, if you want to call them that. There's a reason for that. It's not like it just comes about because a baby is born as a terrorist. Terrorists are made, not born. And so if you try to talk to a general about tactics with regard to managing a region where we have military bases and we're trying to maintain order, if you bring up anything of a psychological nature or even a sociological nature, they simply cannot hear that. There's no room for social analysis at the military. These regiments, these battalions, these Army intelligence cells are led by people who've been in the military their whole lives. They only think in terms of troop deployment. They only think in terms of advanced weaponry. You can't get them to have any kind of a psychological discussion because, for one thing, they don't care about that. They don't care what the psychology of war is. They only care about being able to control regions and maintain stability and peace as they see peace. They see peace as compliant populations submitting to a military presence. That really doesn't work. There's a lot of unrest in areas that are ruled by military bases, and the hostility leads to hostile philosophies and hostile attempts to attack and in many cases gain power, creating armies to attack the current powers that are invading and occupying their spaces. So terrorist groups and terrorist mentalities are created, and the United States has created many of those kinds of people. When you are trying to maintain and sequester oil supplies, and you're supporting the state of Israel because you're using them as a democracy, and you're justifying your presence in the region as being pro-democracy, but what you're really doing is destabilizing Muslim governments for the purpose of being able to attack regimes in order to confiscate their oil, sequester oil provinces, drill and complete wells, and siphon trillions of dollars out of the region. That has a lot to do with our presence in the Middle East. That creates a lot of hostility. So many of the terrorist groups that we have to fight today are groups that we created in the first place. And to be able to tell this to a general will get you nowhere, except a court-martial if you're already in the military. But the way I see it is, the answer is the media. We have journalists from every region of the world that would be deployed in tributaries of all of our military bases. It would be a requirement for every military base to have a media liaison, and the media liaison would be a radio or television station, some kind of print media, and then we would be spending a huge amount of money on media. You can call it propaganda. A lot of it would be psychological and sociological. A lot of these things I have prepared to do myself in the form of vignettes. I'm looking for a woman that can be my television partner, and we would have a script that we would call a vignette, and we would work out conflicts together so that we could model the working out of conflicts that causes anger, which would be forged into understanding, which would be forged into solutions. We would show a conflict that would turn into intimacy, then would turn into love, then would turn into the sharing and promulgating these kinds of vignettes into programs and psychological cells that would be adjunct to all of our military bases, so that eventually all the weapons, all the bullets and bombs, all the mass destruction of humanity would be forged into understanding, social organization, joint ventures involving commerce that would be allied with social understandings, so that a business would be occupied by social understandings, all under the umbrella of a military base that would be for protection only, not for assaults on populations, not for retribution or vengeance, but strictly for the protection of the media organs that would evolve from these regions. We would have 100,000 journalists, all connected to the United States, which is the media capital of the world, and we would be spreading the understanding of problems that people have with their families, their schools, their work environment, and we would forge all of this into understandings that would be delivered through the media and vignettes and programs and a total organization of military assets into human assets in the form of stories and movies and documentaries and vignettes, where we are starting to sell and we're starting to market and starting to use as our military assaults based upon TV programs, assaults based on commercials, assaults based upon yelling as opposed to shooting. We can do this. We can forge all of these wars into social experiences where hostility is in the form of yelling and body language, as opposed to killing and creating generation after generation of hostility and revenge and a desire for vengeance. This is all possible. We'll have plenty of help from our friends in the atmosphere. Their incentive is to have a human body. Their incentive is to understand the human condition. Their incentive is to be born into human bodies and to evolve as insightful leaders that will come from all of the education that I'm talking about in this piece that I'm delivering. I hear a lot of noises in the background. I hope it's not going to interfere with any concentration on what I'm trying to express. We go through a great deal of effort to maintain our privacy. All of the work that I do is all done with as much privacy as possible. My partners, my cinematographer, the person that sends my emails, they allow me to use their materials, their equipment, their electronic conveyance materials to operate my life. There are those noises again, so I will sign off with those noises in the background.